Episode 26 of the Grandsire podcast. Like I always say, very creative name, very creative guy, all that good stuff. Even my dog's name is creative. I literally named him after the color he is, so people appreciate that. But here we are with Craig Allen. It's been a very long time. We saw it before. It's been over a year. What's going on, man? How are you?
I mean, it felt like it was just yesterday. We were chatting about that before the show. Like, it felt like I was here not that long ago, and I couldn't believe it's been so long. But yeah, I mean, been a crazy year for the sport, as everybody knows. I mean, we had like a few weeks off. You get to retool a little bit, and then it was just right back to the races. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm really looking forward to the spring. Obviously, this week we don't have a UFC event, but we have Bellator. Braves got kind of a crazy card going on, and then you got all the One Championship stuff starting up next month. So it's always a good time to be an MMA fan. And I mean, it's always neat to kind of look outside of just the confines of the UFC. So I'm really looking forward to it. I'm glad to be back.
For sure, man. Would you believe me if I told you at UFC 260, while everybody was watching, I was dead sleep, getting ready for work the next day?
Holy crow.
Unfortunately, like that's the way it is.
I think what I'm going to do, because, as everybody's been doing it, we used to do like the fight companions way back when, and then we kind of took a break because it was just, you're droning into a computer screen forever. And if there's nobody in the chat, it gets a little wonky, especially if you're doing like 6 hours. So we shortened it to just the pay-per-view. There's some people that tune in and have questions and whatnot, but some of those reactions, I mean, I was wearing the Fight Night Picks baseball jersey. I ripped that thing off. I had a pretty good time. So I'm going to try and clip some of that stuff so people can see it. But listen, I mean, you were asleep. That's all right. It was a good card, though. It was pretty good I mean, listen, I'm not a celebrity fan. You're not a celebrity fan. So we couldn't be there live, right? We're not leveled up like your guest or former guest, John Anik. So we're not there yet.
That's right.
But it was pretty good for sure.
Man, those fight companions, I feel like there was one time where it was like James Lynch was doing them and a few people sort of did it. And then one day Shaq hits me up and he's like, you want to hop on this fight companion? And now I feel like everyone has a fight companion, but it's like, people, it's like the 2-3 people that were doing it, they were going to have success. But now if you have 17 different ones to choose from, like everyone's numbers are about to get real shitty.
Yeah, there's always competition out there. I mean, for us, like, we have the previews and then we have the pre-show. But we've had a pre-show for a really long time. And it's not like the name you wouldn't know, I guess, because it's question mark kicks is the name of it. What the hell's I know what a question mark kick is in MMA. I don't get to see it near enough, right? But what is that? So at least it's something totally different. But then there's only so many different ways to say, hey, come watch the fights with me. You could call it a live event companion. You can call it fight companion. There's a few different things. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of them out there. But it is, like I said, it's a good chance for me to not sound as polished as maybe I do, like in some of those previews, because you gotta, I mean, geez, the amount of tape study notes, and you'd know that, especially from like interviews and getting ready for fights, you gotta do it in a certain sequence, certain order. And those, it's kind of just off to the races, and you kind of have a good time with it. So I look forward to them that way. But in a week off like this, it's always weird too. I mean, what do I do?
I mean, that was the thing, too, when Shaq invited me on for the first time. He's like, we want to try out this fight companion and stuff. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, late at night like this with the people, people are watching us and the fights. Do they want Lucas to sit down with a suit and tie with glasses on telling you about, oh, what a beautiful hook, and let's look at this footwork? Or do you want me to start talking some shit and then maybe give you some behind-the-scenes anecdotes about how Kevin Holland hates me or stuff like that? And, I'm like, that's more fun for the people than me trying to be John Anik, because I will never be John Anik. Haircut-wise, that's the closest we're going to get. So people respond to the more casual, fun things, but you still have to be careful that you're not talking shit about people while you're doing it.
The best part, and a couple people had a laugh about it, like, again, you take yourself seriously and you try and be as professional as you can. But at the same time, you're breaking down that wall where it's a conversation between myself, Matt, the people that are tuning in and watching the fight. So you're right. You can't be the John Anik. You can't even be, the one thing that I really like to do once, borders open up and I can come back to the States, or even borders, like if the border with Nova Scotia opened up and I could cover Fight League Atlantic, it's, I'd love to try to do like a broadcast or try to do the fights live, do the Anik, do the, Mike Goldberg, so on and so forth. So you're trying to do that, but at the same time, yeah, you got to have a little bit of fun with it. But the aside here, and a few people caught it when we did the fight companion, we have this thing where we go, oh, that's a pop and popcorn fight. Like if it's one that I wouldn't gamble on, or just in general, I want to sit back and enjoy this fight. Well, we always have the props. So I've got the Soda Stream. And I've got a popcorn maker, and it's just, the cheap little one, and spins and pops, and you put it in the bowl. So I always make that stuff up before the fight. So we sit there, we're ready for it. You've got your popcorn. Lucas, that's a prop. It's a prop. You pick it up, you go, look at this, and then you let the other guy talk, and you take a couple pieces, eat it quick, have a drink, and then keep talking. But Matt just takes it as, I'm snacking this whole time. So when I'm done my, 2-3 minute thing that I have to say, and I stop, and then I give it to Matt, and I'm not paying attention, the kid's got a mouthful of popcorn, you look pretty silly. So anybody out there, if you have any props, don't eat your props. Just keep them to the side. They're just props.
That was the thing is the first time I ever did one, I was coming off work and I had very tired and all that stuff. So I was like, let me have this energy drink with me, and that way regularly, sipping all that stuff. And went with Banks, it's UFC, all that good stuff. And didn't I feel like you got something for us. Like,
okay, so your guy John Anik's a big energy drink guy, right?
I think so.
Oh yeah, huge
P3 and Modelo. I think that's what he's known for.
But I'm pretty sure he's a Red Bull guy. I hate to cut you off, but this is the one thing you have to do. If you know you're going to be chugging Red Bulls, which for me on Saturday night, it was a King can before the first show and then a King can during the second show. I'm pretty good at figuring it out. I have done one of the pre-shows and I had to apologize for it while I was doing the show. If you do that on an empty stomach, you're setting yourself up for failure. And I did that. Empty stomach, chugged it during the show, and then right near the end, I went, listen, I got to be honest. I can't focus for shit. So you're gonna have to just figure out whatever we're doing here, Matt, and we'll go from there. But you got to be careful with those.
There's the peeing thing, and the main thing I was worried about. So I put it down next to me, and I was like, I'm gonna strategically take some sips. And then I got in my head about I don't want to be the guy that's like sipping right in the mic, where every time somebody else is talking, you hear like a, and it's like, Lucas, it's very distracting, very annoying. Obviously, you got it down where you can do it and it looks normal, but I was so worried about it. It just sat there and it went from cold to room temperature. And the whole time I'm thinking like at some point we're going to, and nothing happened of it.
Between the drinking and then the other thing that's really hard to figure out, and especially in these live shows, and I even like, I'll start to do it now. And it's like, are you the annoying broadcaster? And in my case, are you the annoying older brother where Matt gets fired up about something and he's like, yeah, but he's moving forward into the mic. So he's done his thing, and I went, I apologize to everybody. We just burst your eardrums, but just back up or look up to the ceiling and do it. Like, that's all. But it all comes like you get it with practice and you figure it out, really.
Well, I feel like doing it with your brother, like if it was like if Shaq did something like that, I wouldn't say anything to him. But if it was my brother, it'd be like, hey, dumbass. Like, I'd be quick to anger and quick to say something to him. Cause it's like, I know you too damn well let you get away with that. So I feel like for you, it's worse because, and you're the older brother. So it's like at this point, he's in for it if he does anything like that.
Oh, well, I mean, I wasn't too fired up, but I mean, like those fights, whether you watch them live or whether you woke up and watched them on Sunday or after the fact on Sunday, whatever. I mean, there's a lot to get excited about for sure.
Oh man, like, I woke up and in the past I've done the thing where it's like, you don't look at your phone, put on Fight Pass and just watch it. And still, the one I did it with was Ngannou versus Cain Velasquez, and I was still in France. Like, obviously, the time change is a tough one. And I'm like, I'm ignoring the results, and then you accidentally look at how much time is left on the broadcast. The fight hasn't started, and I see there's 10 minutes left. So I'm like, oh my, somebody's getting finished. And then it's like, who do you think? Look at and sure enough, fight starts, boom, boom, Cain is out, and I was like, damn, kind of ruined it for myself. But it's very difficult to pretend to watch them live when it's not, and your phone's sitting there trying to spoil it for you too.
And I mean, it's kind of funny, go behind the fourth wall, so to speak. Like, I've seen some messages today, like, where's Vettori Till? Give us Vettori Till. Calm down. You do the preview game, and then midweek there's updates, and then you have the shows on Saturday, and then Sunday's tape study, and you're doing graphics, and it's all over again. You got to take a break at some point. So this is a welcome week and a bit off where I don't have to do all of that. I can do some more creative stuff and just get my head out of it. But you're right. I mean, in that grind, yeah, it's tricky. And then to not watch them, like, I've gotten in trouble. So people have asked about Askren and the Paul fight there. I could care less about that because when we took a week off from UFC, we wanted to get creative. We thought, well, what can we do? let's do Roy Jones and Mike Tyson. Like the card was good. Rashad Coulter was supposed to fight Hasim Rahman Jr. Like that was exciting. There was a little bit of an MMA angle with some of it. And for me, and Matt knows this, and some people know it, I was a huge Nate Robinson fan. Like I have a Celtics Nate Robinson jersey from when we went to go see them play the Timberwolves. So I was so excited to see Nate Robinson fight, obviously knowing that Jake Paul was going to win. But so we did a preview show of that and we poured our heart and soul into it. I've never gotten so much hate in my whole career of covering combat sports than doing that. So for anybody out there that wants to hear a peep out of me with the Askren Paul stuff, it's not going to happen. But like the week off, very, very welcome. You need time to recharge.
You spoke about the hate a little bit, and the thing that always makes me laugh is when your stuff gets posted on Reddit and everybody's always talking about, the children that's doing the previews. And I'm laughing because, I'm like, I go through the same thing. And you guys, or I don't know about your brother, but I know you're older than me. So it makes me laugh. 'Cause it's like, I just imagine like, random kids talking about the fight. And in reality, it's like, these are grown people. Like Craig is married. Craig is a grown ass man. Like, it kills me.
I don't know, like maybe I gotta grow. Like Matt had like a weird goatee going for a little bit. Now he's got the shag with the hair. I mean, I could just put the ring up all the time, but I mean,
Yeah.
we all know those people that got married like right out of high school, so I could be one of them too. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things you just kind of have to break out of it. And then the other thing that you notice too, and I'm sure you've seen this, is I started, what are we, the 29th? I know exactly when we started. We started April 4th, 2018. That was when I was like, all right, doing a podcast. Had no idea what I was doing. But when I started, it was a podcast, and then it was a radio show, and then it was YouTube, and then it slowly snowballed into YouTube to where 2019, pretty much everything was on YouTube. We didn't even focus on the podcast. And then in 2020, we kind of went back and went, well, geez, we probably should be posting some podcasts. And now we're kind of branching out a little bit more from it. But now it's like, nobody remembers anything we ever did before because they weren't there then. And now we're just like, you guys are Fight Night Picks and you have to pick every single fight. Yeah. And if you're not doing it, then forget about you. So yeah, it's kind of weird how things have gone like the last couple of years. And you kind of get pigeonholed a little bit, but you just got to take it all in stride. And it's the same thing. Like you read the comments, and I sent, because we've got a new guy working with us as an editor, and Joshua Hart. And I sent him a message over the weekend. I was like, listen, I read a lot of the comments, but at the end of the day, it's got to be like water off a duck's back. You have a good weekend, nobody ever comments. You have a terrible weekend, and it seems like everybody and their dog has something to say about you. So it's just, I really, like, I used to, you take some of it to heart, you focus on it quite a bit. Now it's like, sure, there's some very good constructive criticism out there, and I'm definitely going to listen to it. But 90% of the criticism is just like, some troll with the letter T on their YouTube banner. And that's that's it. Like they're just out there to be mean and to stir the pot, I guess.
It's crazy because a lot of people, they think because they discovered you, like you started making content at the same time they discovered you. Like I've had some people where it's like, well, how long have you been covering the sport? And it's like 5 years. Like what? And it's like, yeah, I mean, just because you haven't seen it. So I mean, sometimes you do feel like you're working under a rock, like you're doing stuff and you're the only one that sees it. And then people are like, how are you getting these interviews? Like, my God, I've been grinding. Like, some of these guys I talk to on the regional scene, and it's like, nah, you haven't been around that long. I have. It's just nobody knows who I am.
There was somebody last week, and the comment was, these guys are just really big fans of the sport, da-da-da-da-da. But like I go to the shows and I cover them, and then like I talk about them, and I used to do fighter interviews. Now I don't, but we have fighter, like, I don't know. Again, you just don't sit on it. Don't chew on it too much. Of course I have with that one because it's stuck in my brain, but yeah, just keep moving forward.
The fan thing is weird because at first when the fans would say that, it's like, obviously you start off as a fan, and the reason you cover this sport that's so little money is because you're a fan. But at some point you do want people to see you as, I'm not one of you guys who gets to talk to these guys. Like, I'm doing it because, I want to turn this into a career. But the fans, I managed to let that one go if they say I'm a fan. But if you have a journalist that doesn't, like, somebody else that covers MMA that doesn't acknowledge where you're at, or, they're like, I'm up here and you're just a guy, blah, blah, blah. That one does sting. I'm not going to lie to you. That is the one where you're kind of like, that hurts, man. I thought we were counterparts.
I've only ever had one person in MMA really, it was a fighter, and I finished, the interview didn't go well. And I've talked about this one before, But the interview went poorly. It was a he. He was in his truck doing
I
the
assume
interview.
you can't tell us the fighter's name, I assume?
I'm not going to give it away. He's
Okay.
Canadian, though. I will say that. But he was in his truck. He did the interview. It was choppy. Like, it's a person driving down the highway in their truck. You
Yeah.
can't really hear all that great. Now, mind you, this is back. Listen, I had like giant headphones, no microphone, like the microphone and the headphone. Like it was a bad setup. The lighting, just none of it was good. Holding my phone up to the microphone because that's all I could think of, which
Right.
I think is what most people would end up doing anyway. But I was right at the start. So anyway, I'm doing this interview. He cut out midway and then he popped back in. So I did up the graphic. I put it out on Twitter and I was creative. And when I first started, I followed a model of fighter name and then in brackets at and their what do you call it?
Their handle.
Their handle. You got it. Exactly.
Yeah.
Put the handle in there, did up the little blurb, the link, the picture,
Yep.
and so on. And the guy messaged me back at the end of it. He's like, LOL, you're an amateur. You don't know what you're doing. And then he gave me a blurb that I should have written up about him, which was something that like a promoter would have put out. I'm not your promoter. Like what? No. And then he just kept going on and on. And at the end of it, like he was initiating it. And I just went, all right, have a nice day. Thanks for talking. And never. And I've had, the funny thing is recently there was an opportunity to, talk to him again. And I just, no interest in talking to him. He won't remember it, but I do. So I've only ever had that happen one time. And I've felt this way before, but after that one, it was like, all right, this is the big one. Like, just treat people the way you want to be treated. Like, you're not above anybody. Don't be like that. Like, you just, because I mean, it's stuck with me and it's been like 2+ years since then. So yeah, just don't do that. Don't do that to people.
I had kind of a similar situation where, the first time I ever, and I'll say his name because you can literally find the interview. It's not, but Tanner Bozer, I talked to him for Sure Dog. And, at the time I was in France, so it was tough to watch a lot of fights live and stuff like that. So before talking to him, like the interview came together pretty quickly because at Sure Dog, I was just volume. I had to get 15 done a month. I'm trying to talk with whoever. And this guy, I didn't look at any pre-fight interviews or anything. I just kind of went into it like I'm aware of his record, kind of his fight style. And that was a big mistake because Tanner is not someone you want to go into an interview with without being prepared. And man,
No.
even James Lynch was like, wow, he got hostile quick. And I was like, yeah, and that's my fault. But, the thing is, I wanted to talk to him like, listen, you just signed to the UFC. You know what I mean? There's an experienced name because you haven't fought there. And, and he's like, how so? What are you talking about? And I was like, oh, man. And then, I'm like, you have a mullet. What's the story? There's no story. I cut my hair like this. I was like, wow, this guy's tough.
He was one of the first interviews I ever did. But when I first started Fight Night Picks, the point was UFC's cool, but I'm going to try my angle at One Championship, KSW, ACB at the time. Like, so I got super hooked on Piotr Jan and Askar Askarov. And that's not a tire pump because it came with the territory. Like, there's so many good fighters that were with the promotion. Tanner Bozer was one of them. So when I got him, I was like, man, what was it like fighting for ACB in Montreal? Like, how cool is that to be for a Russian promotion, but fighting in Canada? And what if and in the interview, he's like, man, I don't want to sign to the UFC. Like they passed over me already. I don't want to be there. Like, this is the way to go. The money's good. So my experience was great. Yeah. But my guy was in one of the lower weight classes.
Now, so the thing about Tanner, it makes me think of your story because, he had another fight and then I was like, you know what? Because some guys just sort of give up where you're like, okay, you know what? Like, we're never going to have a good, interview, whatever. So whatever. But with him, I was like, you know what? That was my fault if it went badly. So let me see if I can talk to him a second time and see it as kind of a challenge. Second time around, it got great views. Interview was decent. But my thing was like, listen, a lot of fighters, they give you this bullshit like, oh, I learned a lot from my last loss and blah, blah. Tanner's like, nah, I didn't learn anything. You don't always learn stuff. So I was like, okay, this guy, like, if he thinks it, he's going to say it. So he's not going to hit you with bullshit answers. So don't give him bullshit questions. And it went well. And I'm pretty sure, and I say that confidently, maybe I'm wrong. If I hit him up again, he would do the interview. But mentally was like, I fixed it. Like that, like this guy, it doesn't take no shit. So I got to make sure my questions aren't shit.
No, he's one of the more interesting interviews out there because, like you said, he just calls it like he sees it, and he's not. Yeah, he's not going to give you form answers. Like, he's definitely not a hockey player, that's for sure. Like they're good. They're always interesting.
Yeah, but I mean, it's fun too because if every interview is just bullshit, like, I really like this matchup, my boxing, or you got a guy, it's like, you like the matchup? Yeah, it's all right, but I don't care. You know what I mean? Like sometimes it's more interesting too.
Yeah, like I don't know. Again, I mean, the last interview I did was in December. I don't do a whole lot of them. I mean, we
Yeah.
had we tried to relaunch this week in MMA, which we're going to relaunch this week. So how cool is that? But the last one was in December. Before that, it was like a year before. But we had Adrian Yanez on, and I
It's a good
mean,
interview.
it was before that. You're right. He does a lot of interviews, but they're always like, I find the quality is really good. Like he speaks very well. Now I know he's a Dr. Pepper guy. I'm a Dr. Pepper guy, so that's
Yeah.
pretty cool. But yeah, no, he's a good one, and he made it interesting too. So it was good. But the trouble when I first started, and I was doing a lot of interviews, like it was probably two or three a week, or 2 to 4 a week, because I'd have 2 on each podcast, one podcast Monday, one on Friday. It was so much. But the thing that bugged me the most, and this is what turned me off of it, was getting ready for one and doing so much prep work, and then it falls apart.
Yeah.
And again, like you know, you can't get too upset about it. You just got to take it on the chin and move to the next one. But I had a hard time with that.
It happened to me on this podcast where I was supposed to have Alex Nicholson, and I put out the graphic and everything, and then I
Now
I
Craig
knew
Allen's
I
here.
knew yeah, exactly. Now we got Craig Allen, which is even better, but a better heavyweight. But now it was like you knew
Skater's gonna skate, Lucas.
exactly.
Skater's gonna skate.
Exactly. But I knew he was a flight risk, but I was like, you know what? We've been talking back and forth if it happens. And sure enough, it's like, here's the link to join me, man. Scene. Oh, it's like, damn, that hurts. And then Will Brooks was supposed to come on too. And then with that one, everything's good to go. And then last minute flaked. And, you can sit there and cry about it. You can be like, you know what? Let's just move on to somebody else. And then we end up with Craig. We end up with the all-star here himself. So, that's just how it works.
Hey man, third time's the charm, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Instead of crying about it, we have Craig tell us about fight night picks. But no, one thing I do want to touch on though is that you mentioned you guys are doing things a little bit different. I saw you brought in John Coe to do some interviews. Like, what are you guys trying to turn fight night picks into? Because it looks like things are getting interesting.
Trying to get away from just this, because
Yeah,
just this, like I said, it's a grind. And the thing that happens, everybody gets burnout. It
yeah,
happens. I mean, I was burnt out that one week. Which card? What it might have been the Blades Lewis card that was scheduled the first time. I think it was that card that we took off. But there was a week where it was like, you know what? On Saturday, the fights were going on, and we went, listen, next weekend we have to take a break. We have to do something else. And people got riled up. So instead of just going, I'm not doing anything, and I'll put a post out on Twitter that maybe somebody doesn't see, or I put it on Instagram, we made a video where I held pads for Matt, and then we said, we're going to revamp this week in MMA. People got excited. And then we had Yanez on. We had Canadian country music star Tebe on. And if you haven't listened to Tebe, you should, because he's great. But we had him on because he's a big UFC fan. And we did that. We did the Tyson Jones stuff. People got riled up about both. And then you get back into the picks, and it's the same thing every single week, to where I like to think I have a good enough memory. Like when I was a kid, I don't know about you. When I was a kid, I would always play like MLB The Show, NHL. I'd play like Madden. I'd always play those games, and I'd memorize stat lines. And then I was a kid that, like, I have a pretty big baseball and hockey card collection. Cool thing most people probably didn't know about Craig Allen. Does my wife like it? No, because it takes up a lot of space in the closets. And they sit there now. But when I was a kid, you pick up a baseball card. And I know, geez, David Ortiz is hitting 281 right now with 13 homers and 35 ribbies. And I know that like month by month, but year by year. So that's how it helped getting into MMA. I liked MMA. I figured, what's the best way to get into it? That's the way that I'm going to go at it. But now it's like, let's think. I mean, we had an interview with Jack Shore today. He's fighting Hunter Azure. Did I remember what Hunter Azure's last fight was off the top of my head? No. If I was still just a fan, maybe I would have remembered. But doing so many fights every single week, you lose track. I mean, I remember Jack Shore had a fight with Khalid Taha back in November, December. I had no idea why it fell out, because Khalid Taha ended up taking a fight and boom goes the dynamite. It's just, there's so much repetition. And then the other thing too is, people want Bellator, people want people want KSW, PFL. It's I want to cover those. I want to talk about them. And I want to talk about them more like we're talking right now, a little bit laid back. I don't have to be so like to the point, but I can turn it on at certain points. And so we're kind of trying to do that. If anybody's really kind of looking into the nuts and bolts of things, we're just trying to diversify a little bit and not just be, and that's the funny thing, not just be that. Because when this started, it wasn't just picks. It was a podcast about everything. And then I kind of leaned into the name a little bit too hard, maybe. And so now we just got to kind of pull back the curtain and go back to what we were doing before.
I mean, do you guys have to do something similar to like a KFC, for example, where it's like you just go by like FNP and it's no longer like every time you say it, so that way people think less about the picks? Because it sounds like you guys have an aggressive fan base too.
So I said we've got a live show on Saturdays and it's called Question Mark Kicks. It's QMK. Most people know it as QMK. So if I can make a show that has nothing to do with, hey, this is a final preview of the week, to, oh, I got to check out QMK at the end of the week. Yeah, I mean, FNP kind of hits. FNP recaps just dropped for UFC 260 with Matt and John. So yeah, we've tried to do that. I mean, early stoppage, even just making it ES, like there's things like that. So yeah, it's all a fun game, and you just get to test things out and see if they work. And if you talk about, fantasy or exhibition boxing matches, people won't like it, and you learn from it.
The crazy thing about the picking fights is, how big gambling is now in MMA. I feel like they legalized it in the States, and then all of a sudden it's like people get a great, even for interviews, like people are like telling you what questions to ask, or, they're using your interviews to set their own picks. And that's terrifying. You're like, hold on, like, don't put me responsible. I'm just asking stuff. So, and I assume for you guys with the picks, people are using that, to make money, which is a terrifying thing.
Yeah, it is. With the whole picking thing, like this is where it gets fun. So there's always a structure. Short intro, fighter A, fighter B. Part C, equal opportunity in this fight and why. Part D, here's the odds, and let's pair those with the Tapology votes. People go, oh, the Tapology votes don't care. All right, sure they don't. But your hardcore MMA fans that are really tuned into the fights, they're going to care enough to sign into a website to tell the website who they think is going to win. So it's just like Verdict MMA or any of the other sites or apps that are out there. If somebody takes the time, if there's 3,500 to 4,000 people to vote on those, then there's a decent likelihood that one of those two could win. But it's always comparing them to the odds, because if, let's say, fighter A is minus 250 favorite, but on Tapology, only 10% of the fans have them, like, why is there such a difference? So it's a talking point there. And then there's like a 30-second, this is my pick and here's why. And you see it in the analytics that you have a big spike at the start and you have a huge spike at the end. And in the middle, it looks like a canoe going like that. Yeah. So I get it. People are only in it for the picks. And the funniest thing is you lay out a game plan for one person to win, and then at the end, you flip the pick. You get it wrong, and everybody gives you a hard time. It's like, hey, you didn't even listen to the video. Like, maybe I'll make something up. Maybe I said Stipe was going to mop the floor with Francis. Or vice versa. I said Francis was going to mop the floor with Stipe, and at the end I put Stipe, and everybody gets mad at me. Well, clearly you didn't watch the video, but nobody cares. So yeah, it's always fun that way. And to the point of the whole gambling thing, we got a couple comments this week that were like, why don't you dive into the gambling aspect a little bit more? Why don't you make it more like that? Because there's all sorts of shows like that out there, and I just like to have a different spin on it. So I'm going to keep doing my thing. And, if you want to seek that stuff out, then by all means, check it out on some of the other channels. And that's the other thing too. There's a lot of other great creators. You see Best Fight Picks. You got Dan. You got what? Line Sniper. You've got Manpreet with MMA Lock of the Night. Like, that's the best part. Where's the Lock of the Night? Well, go watch Manpreet's channel. Like, that's what we always say that. Go check him out, because that's his thing. We're just going to keep doing just picks. And if you go with them, then kudos to you.
I feel like that's the thing too, where some people are kind of scared to acknowledge that there are other creators, right? That do stuff that are different. Like people ask me all the time, like, how do you record your interviews and stuff? Most of the time, I'm just sending them out to James Lynch's videos, and I'm like, hey man, that's don't even come to me. Like that's the master right there. He's got everything. Just do that. You know what I mean? But some people are, they're more conceited, and it's like, let me go through the big process. Like it's okay to acknowledge that there are other people that do things and even better than you and stuff like that. And you just because you pretend they don't exist doesn't mean they're not real.
No, that's it. And I mean, the one other thing that and listen, if you're an MMA fan, don't take this personally. But there's a lot of MMA fans out there, and it's more Twitter than it is anything. And we, again, you want to talk break the fourth wall. On YouTube during our shows, we say this all the time. If you're on MMA Twitter, and Ariel's a great example, and I don't want to pick on him, but he has a great thing going with ESPN and the NBA, right? And he's a huge NBA fan. If you were Ariel Helwani and you're huge Knicks fans and just basketball fan in general, and they said, hey, Lucas, we're going to give you a microphone. Do you want to do sideline interviews? What? Yeah, you're going to say yeah. Don't get mad at them for it, but that's the big thing. If you're over on Twitter, listen, I'm a big baseball fan. I'm a big hockey fan. I like a lot of different sports. But if I talk about them on Twitter, like no dice, stay in your lane. But on YouTube, I can talk about, remember the time that Robert Ory hip checked Steve Nash into the scorers table and it totally changed the playoffs that year? Like I can say things like that. Like, remember that Dream Team Suns team that had Amari Stoudemire and Barboza and all those great players? And people, like, some people are going to get the reference. Some people are going to not get it and don't care. So you can kind of play around with that. But that's the biggest thing I've noticed over the years with MMA fans is you go on the different platforms and everybody's so different.
That's the talk I had with James Lynch too, because I think the second episode of the podcast I had a celebrity nutritionist on, and so it's like a legitimately famous person. He's out there with Wonder Woman and stuff. So I'm like, holy crap, the views are terrible. And I'm talking about it with James Lynch, and he's like, you got to understand your audience. Like these are MMA fans. And once I realized that, it was like, oh yeah, I can't tweet about the Charlotte Hornets. I can't do a podcast. Someone's got nothing to do with MMA because I'm not famous, but it's like the people that do follow my work, that's what they're in there for.
Yeah, and that's the thing too with if I try to diversify, go look at my attempts. The views are nowhere near the picks. So you got to kind of tread lightly. You got to pay attention to the numbers. And if it really falls off, then there's probably not a lot of sense in doing it. And that's why it kind of scares me, if a decent chunk of people say, and you throw out the YouTube community polls, hey, what other content do you want other than just the UFC? 70% say Bellator, and it's 2,000 votes. Well, geez, maybe I should do a Bellator video. And then I do a Bellator video. The picks are great. I think the last time we did one, we were like 6-2 or 7-1. Like, you're knocking it out of the park, but nobody watched it. So it's a weird balance that you just have to kind of figure out as you go.
The weird thing with the the MMA fans, like you mentioned, is that they say they want one thing, but then when you do it, they don't watch it. They're like, you guys need to cover the regional scene. Are you going to watch it if I do it? Oh, no, but you need to do it. It's like, that's who we're making content for, dumbass. Like, we're making it for you. Like, if you want it, watch it. Or people are like, oh, support my guy, Lucas. Like, okay, do you support me? Like, are you subscribed and stuff? Oh, no. So why are you saying that, man? Like, you can't, we're depending on other people and you're telling people to do stuff, but you're not doing it yourself. So these people are very weird.
It's tricky. And then, to go back to the fan aspect thing too, like I covered one UFC event where I was there in person, 4 fight night picks. It was in 2018. Does anybody know? No. I mean, I've got I've got the poster there and I'm always like, hey, remember that time that Volkan Oezdemir fought Anthony Smith?
Yeah.
Craig Allen was there. But nobody does. So yeah, it's a funny one. And then the other thing, like, you kind of talked about it. I can't wait to get back to the States. I can't wait to get back to Nova Scotia. I wasn't even at the first Fight League Atlantic, but I can't wait to, I love the province, but go there when they have fights, or go back down to Maine when they have fights, or, knock wood, drive down to Connecticut or New York or whatever. I mean, Connecticut to get to Uncasville is 10 hours. So that's a long drive to cover it. And then again, you never know how it's going to be received, especially with Bellator. But I can't wait to get back out there. But the last time I covered a fight event, I think was February 10th, 2020. It was Bruce Boynton and the Bermudez Triangle, Manny Bermudez, NEF. So yeah, and then even there too. For me, I look at it with the regional events. It's just an opportunity to get reps, and I'm sure you've kind of been in a situation where, like, even with the UFC was one of the first shows I ever covered in general. You go there, you're a one-man crew or a one-woman crew. Like, it's you, your laptop, your camera, and you got to zip around and you have to do everything. You produce it, you shoot it, you do everything. Those are awesome skills to have. So if there is somebody out there that's listening that is thinking about doing these things, and like you said, you've had the questions about, well, how do I do the interviews or what gear do you have? James does an awesome job, and he's a really good sounding board too to go back and forth with. The one person show, so to speak, if you get the opportunity to cover, and I would definitely say like a smaller regional scene show, do it. Ask the promoter and do it. And I got caught in a sticky situation really early on where we had an upstart promotion they had 6 shows overseas, and then they tried to make a go of it in New Brunswick. And it was Matt and it was Matt's first MMA show that he covered himself. He manned a t-shirt booth. We had probably 40 t-shirts and we sold 2 because people felt bad for us. But we went to that and the promoter was like, hey, can I put my logo on your shirts if you're going to come and sell shirts? And I was like, well, A, I don't have any money, but B, if I have 40 shirts, knowing in my head full well, nobody knows who I am anyway, I'm not putting your logo on my shirt. And he basically held it over me like, you're not going to cover this event if you don't put my logo on your shirt and I get a cut. So I hit up Josh Gross and I was like, straight up, I was auxiliary MMA JA. I'm somehow still, I think, I don't know, but I hit up Josh Gross and I was like, hey, you have a ton of experience and you have experience with the UFC and some of these things. So like, what do you think? And he gave me really, really sound advice. So to me, there's lots of great MMA media members out there that can help you out. For me, I mean, James was a huge help. Josh was a huge help when I was starting out. Like there's a lot of really good people out there.
The funny thing, you mentioned the events, like everybody's always saying like, go out and cover these regional events and stuff. People are saying that to me. And I really got into covering MMA when I moved to France, right? Perfect timing. The fights are on at a stupid time. And everybody's like, yeah,
and there's no regional scenes that you can cover.
That's the thing. Everybody, and some people are getting mad at me. It's like, why aren't you at these events? What events? Show me the events I should be at. There are no events. And then, and then you sort of get to a point where you get big enough that some people start to recognize your name and they think you're at some of these events. And it's like, everything I know about covering MMA comes from James Lynch's vlogs. Like just seeing what he does. Like I know I need to buy protein bars and, have a good laptop. Like, but you do reach a point where it's almost like you've done too much at this point to admit that's like, I physically was not able to get to these events.
Yeah, the listen, I mean, if you're covering some of those regional shows, for me, I have to cross an international border to do it. I mean, for us here in New Brunswick, there's 3 promotions. One is up north and it's a French promotion and they cross boxing and kickboxing and MMA, but they're not the highest like level of fights, and it's a drive, it's a jaunt. So no, there's one in Fredericton, but they haven't had a show in 3 years. The promoter's a local boxer that's, everybody has one of those local combat sports legends. He's one of them. And yeah, he ran into some issues with actually having shows in the arenas here. There was a couple fights in the stands, whatever. One of my biggest like actual written articles I interviewed. It was pretty cool, but yeah, safe to say, not a lot of shows in Fredericton where I'm from. And then in Moncton, they have Elite One, and they've had like Butterbean was on one of their shows. Robin Black fought for them at one point. Like they have shows, but it usually happens where they'll have a show and it coincides with NEF. And I like going to Maine anyway, so I usually just go to Maine anyway. But when you're going to those, like, always pack a couple of, pairs of. You got to make sure you dress up for it, even though you might feel silly and you're the only one. Like, I'll wear a jacket and a button-up shirt and like dress it up a little bit. You got to make sure you have all of your equipment before you leave. And the one thing I would say, and I've run into this problem and I still haven't fixed it, make sure you bring a power bank, because you can't just depend on the venue to actually have power there. And I've gotten into a crunch where it's like, hey, Mr. Promoter, do you think somebody could run an extension cord over because my computer's going to die? So it's always tricky that way. Gatorade, water, and energy drinks. And be prepared if you're sitting next to the cage to get splattered. Because, yeah, And make sure you clean your stuff up if you're going to cross an international border, because that's kind of gross too.
The crazy thing is I feel like, covering like say a UFC event where you recognize pretty much most of these media members is, you feel a little bit like you're in high school again. You know what I mean? Where like you show up to, I don't know, something like an event or something, then you got to figure out like, do I talk to people I've never talked to in person before? Do I chill and pretend I'm on my phone? Like I feel like there'd be a moment of holy shit, it's all these guys that I think I know in theory, but then it's like, oh man, I'm not sure I want to go bother these guys. You know what I mean? It's nerve-wracking.
So the smaller regional shows, it's usually the same cast and crew. I mean, it's I'd say 90% are from Maine if I go cover NEF. There's Western Mass MMA that's there, and one of the promoters is from Massachusetts and one's from Maine. So, you talk to the promoters because it's a small show. I'm the only one from Canada that's going to cover it. So there's that. And then I usually go around and chat a little bit. Ryan Gerald, you know him, does fighter interviews. He goes and covers them too. So I'll have a chat with him. And then I just kind of sit down and insulate myself and do my work. And then as soon as the fights are over, and thanks for having me, and I'm gone. And I'm usually at a Denny's because we don't have a Denny's right where I'm at. So I get excited about the breakfast foods at night. But covering the UFC, I mean, only having the experience with the one show, it was unfortunate because they do interviews with TSN and Aaron Bronstetter, but it was all, satellite and in a studio or whatever.
Yeah.
It was me, Jay Anderson from Cage Side Press, and Mike Bond with MMA Junkie. And that was about it for people that were there all week. You had your, local radio, local newspapers, and there's one company out of Moncton that covered it as well. And they were kind of in and out a little bit. But yeah, I mean, there were 3 of us there all week. So I had the opportunity to kind of sit down, talk shop with both of them. And really stand up guys too. So it was kind of neat, but yeah, I can't imagine, like, you go for International Fight Week and there's like 100 media members and probably every one of them by name. I don't know what you do in that circumstance. Try not to get nervous.
Or even I was listening to something Luke Thomas was doing, and he's like, and come introduce yourself. How the fuck, I'm gonna come off like this real douchebag, like, hey, Luke Thomas, I'm Luke. It's like, okay, and why do I care? Oh, you don't, but here I am being confident, like, oh, I'm gonna be your coworker someday. No, probably not. So that's people say stuff like that, and then you're like, do it in person, like, oh, that's a different ball game.
Yeah. It was funny, like you talk about media members. I went to the UFC 220. It was one of the press conferences before because it's free for the fans. I was a fan then. It was right before Fight Night Picks started. So anyway, me and my buddy showed up like as early as we could to get in to get the best seats for this. And I mean, you've seen them before on TV. It's the same way they do it in Vegas. The seats go down and probably the first, I'd say 15 rows are reserved for like friends, family, and media. And then the media kind of sits more in the center. And then behind that, it's all the fans. And there were a lot of fans there. I mean, that was getting ready for UFC 220. Who else? Habib was there with Tony, and Max was there with, I want to say, was it Frankie, maybe? I'd have to look at my phone. Maybe. Anyway, doesn't matter. But they were getting ready for some big fights. And you see, like, I don't know, you see, like, all the big names. Like, Stefan Struve was sitting up there for some reason. Ariel was there. The amount of people. So Ariel stood in one stairwell, and there was a line all the way back to the concession of people walking up to take pictures with Ariel. And he took time with everybody. And then he went across the row to the other stairwell, and there was a line as long of people. And he took pictures with anybody that wanted a picture. Ariel took the time to shake their hand, have a now listen, in these times, we're probably not doing that anymore, but to shake their hand, have a conversation, and like stick around. So, I mean, he did a great job, but I mean, he's the one that everybody's going to want to talk to, but it's kind of crazy in those situations.
It's crazy when you hear that there's like a journalist that's like bigger than the fighters, you know what I mean? Or even like a good example is people were like, when are these guys going to stop fawning over Joe Rogan? Like, they're doing the post-fight interviews and half of it is them drooling and hoping to get invited on the podcast. And it's like, it's crazy when you see how big they are. And then some people, they think they're going to come in and beat Ariel. It's like, my God, there's a reason we have one Ariel. Like even Brett's huge, but he's not Ariel. You know what I mean? Like everyone comes in, I'm going to be the next Ariel. I mean, you're not going to be the next anything. You're going to be yourself. But it's crazy how huge he's gotten.
Like you got to have your thing too. I mean, for me, like we've got our little catchphrases and all that stuff. And, like you kind of make it your own. But look at the schmo. I mean, Dave
Yeah.
Schmollenson just kind of decided, hey, this is going to be my thing, and he's right up there. Like it's
Yeah.
almost 1A 1B. It's kind of crazy. And for Ariel, I mean, he was grinding and grinding for years and years to get where he is. It's not like, he just boom, here's the shot on ESPN. It was MMA fighting, and before that, smaller sites and so on and so
Yeah.
forth. So for a lot of people out there, like you can't just expect instant success. If you get lucky, you get lucky, but it's a lot of hard work that goes into it.
It's funny you talk about the schmo and then you follow with that because I was listening, I think his first episode of the podcast, something like that, where he explains like, I've been here for years and like you guys haven't seen me because I was doing the regular thing. And then I think he realized like MMA fans, they love to hate you. So coming out there with your funny little glasses and screaming into mics, like people hate it, but they love it. And everybody's like, he popped out of nowhere. It's like, nah, dude, he's been there. He just figured out like it's time to change it and figure out what makes me unique. And man, and it's very unique.
Yeah, like it's total. And I mean, like I watch, basketball fan. I don't know if you watch AM Hoops, but Casey was around before. He was just doing other stuff in basketball. And then when he kind of figured it out, went out on his own, like boom, there's his thing. So there's all sorts of people in sports that way. It's just, and that's the other thing you got to do too. I mean, if you're in the business, you can't just look at MMA to try and
Yeah.
figure things out. You got to watch a little bit out of basketball or football or baseball or hockey or whatever to try and figure out what your thing's going to be. But that's it. I mean, if you just think, well, I don't know, I like Luke Thomas. I'm going to be firm and to the point. I might say a little bit of controversial stuff, but I'm going to totally model my stuff after him. But he's already bigger and people are already watching.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
you gotta kind of figure out what your niche is.
Well, and it's difficult too because sometimes you fall into the trap of, like you mentioned, like, I want to be the next Luke Thomas. It's like you can't, like, you can be a version of it, but if you think you're going to grow that big beard and then, and he's got such a good style of like when he's debating, it's like everyone's an idiot except me. And that's what makes him so successful. But it's like, you can't get away with that because there's already someone getting away with that, And even for me, like doing interviews, you don't want to fall into that trap of being like the off brand James Lynch, like a shittier version of someone else. It's a very difficult thing to do.
It's definitely tough to do. And I mean, like when I don't even know, like I'm trying to think. When I started doing the podcast, it was okay, well, I already like these baseball shows. So how can I morph a baseball show and kind of make it like MMA? And I can talk my numbers, but they're not so plain. Well, it was pretty plain because I was just talking into a microphone. Nobody can find it. They're 2-hour episodes where I'm talking about Ramiz Brahimai, where he's fighting with LFA. I think he was 6-0. Like I still remember some of those early episodes. And then it was okay. I brought on John Morgan and I brought on like different people. And I thought, okay, maybe I can kind of model it like you've got MMA Junkie Radio. Maybe I can take a little bit from that. But that's the thing. Then you fall into the trap. I'm too much like those people. How can I change it up a little bit? And maybe you have to look to other sports, but it is tricky. It is tricky. And it's a balance too.
Or the main thing is, and I try to ask for feedback, but I also don't like to bother people. But, sort of doing the same thing over and over again and being shitty at it, and you don't realize it because you're the one that's doing it. Like people act like you have a lot of awareness when you're in the moment. Like you're doing these interviews, you're not focusing on, how am I standing? Do I sound good? You're just like, I'm trying to do this interview, and that's why sometimes, like, if you don't have anyone to tell you, like, hey man, that sucked, you're gonna end up doing that every time, and then wonder why it's not working. It's like, yeah, because you suck and you don't realize it.
Yeah, and I mean, like it's really funny. I would try and do every single week or every couple of weeks, I do a little tweak. I just change something. So if it was picks and predictions, make this font a little bit bigger, make this a little bit different. Like just I would change up our graphics just a little bit that I figure nobody's going to really notice it, but I'll see if it hits. And if it doesn't hit, then go back or whatever. And it's funny to go back like this time last year and then look at what I'm doing now. Man, our videos look bad.
Yeah.
Like, and it's just a year, but it was every single week I do something different. Now it's kind of I feel personally like I've got it a little bit more tuned in, but to the point, if I'm trying to branch out, you can even get yourself into a little bit of creative rut where you're doing the same thing every time. Now I'm tasked with coming up with a new show. I have no idea what to make it look like. Like, yeah. And then you're really at a point where, yeah, I could probably use a little bit of feedback on that too.
That's the funny thing you mentioned looking back at your old videos. Like, I think no one's things have aged worse than mine. Like, anytime I look back at those old, and I'm like, they're unwatchable. Like the fighters, like you mentioned, they're doing it in the interview in their car with pixelated. they look better than I do, and I'm sitting at a desk taking myself too seriously. So it's like you watch that and it's like, yeah, I've improved, but it's like at the time I didn't realize I needed to improve. At the time I was like, if the content's good, well, it's not good. And if you don't have someone to say like, it's not good, my guy, like the computer webcam is not good, then that's how you fall into that trap.
Yeah, you're right. And then, yeah, it's always tricky. It's always tricky. It gets easier. I think it gets easier once you get
Hopefully.
going. I
Yeah.
hope. But it's one of those things like you just got to keep at it and keep working at it. Because if you think, hey, that's it, that's the pinnacle,
Yeah.
then you're never going to go anywhere from it.
So what's your goal like in this industry? Like obviously Fight Night Picks has become this gigantic thing, but is it gonna get to a point where you want to rival like other websites, other shows, or are you gonna reach that point where you're hoping to get that full-time offer? Like what's kind of the goal for you in this industry?
Not really a big rival guy. I used to be. Obviously, you have to be competitive, but at the same time, like you said right at the start, there's so many people out there doing fight companions now that it's just a thing to do.
Yeah.
There's so many people out there doing that. There's so many people out there that are doing every which way, everything. I've got a couple of ideas, and they're not even like off-camera ideas. I've got a couple of ideas. They're pretty big. They're pretty grandiose. So we'll see how that goes. But once things open up and there's live shows, obviously I'd like to do more with that. A lot more of the fan interaction than just me. Hey, this is the fighter I'm talking about today. Here's the preview. Here's the pick. See you later. So for me, it's, we actually have a website. Most people don't know about it. There's a website out there. You can check that out. There's different stuff on there too. There's podcasts out there. I want to kind of grow it that way. The other thing too, you can only go so far with this. There's only so many people that want fight picks and predictions. So you eventually kind of tap that out. And I think we're kind of getting to that point. So you got to try and branch out. But yeah, it really, the whole growth strategy kind of all depends on when we can get back to somewhat of a sense of normalcy. And also, even if there's live events in Florida and Texas, you're not going to see me there, because if I go there, then I have to come home and quarantine for 2 weeks. So that's not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much stuff with the going down to Florida, and it kind of feels gross, like a cesspool of you're almost sure you're gonna come back with something, even if it's not COVID, it's gonna be something else. Like it just, I don't know. To me, it sounds gross.
Just got to knock wood. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be media members there for sure.
John Morgan
But
has to be there legally. I mean, yeah, it's gonna happen.
yeah, I mean, I remember that first show that was in Brazil, the Kevin Lee Oliveira card, when it like dropped out, no fans, no media, whatever. They made such a big deal about Randa Marcos and John McDessie. When they came back to Canada, they had to quarantine for 2 weeks, and everybody in the States went nuts. Like, how crazy. This is archaic. This is insane. And then you look at what Dan Hooker's had to do, and Adesanya, and the fighters from New Zealand, and even Australia too. But up here, it's the same way. Like, you still have to quarantine. I can't go to another province. And if I decided today, hey, I want to go to Quebec, well, I could go there. But as soon as I get back to New Brunswick, I have to quarantine for 2 weeks. No ifs, ands, or buts. You could test negative as many times as you want. You're still going to be here for 2 weeks. I could go to Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, Newfoundland, wherever. I'm stuck here in a box for 2 weeks. So, yeah, I mean, it's even hard to go to the States. Like, you can't drive up to the border and go to the States anymore. You can fly, but you can't drive. So, yeah, it's really tricky that way. But it's kind of neat. It's going to be a neat experiment to see how they make that one work.
The United States thing is weird because in August, so 2020, I went back to the United States to live there, and so I thought going in there's going to be quarantining, testing, all this stuff. So I went out, got the nose swab to show that I didn't have COVID, the blood test show I never had it. Nobody cared whether I had it or not. Like I literally, as long as I had my mask on, unless I was eating chips or something on the plane, nobody cared. Like the whole time I'm thinking like, all right, I gotta be strategic. I gotta have my papers ready and someone's gonna check and I have my green card. It felt like nobody gave a shit. Like I did the whole trip and nobody cared when I got in. Nobody asked if I had it. Like it kind of felt like, I kind of over prepared a little bit. Like I felt like James Bond going in, and then I realized like it's not that deep.
No, and I mean, like, even back in August or so, I went to Ontario at one point. You just hopped on a plane. I mean, you wore your mask, but you hopped on a plane, you got there, you did your thing, you came back. If it was just, let's say it was just me on vacation, If I went there, I would have had to quarantine. You'd have to get a COVID test, all that, stay at home. I was essential service in the career portion of Craig Allen's life, so I could go back out and do whatever. But everybody was sketched out about it because where I'm at right now, we have a spike in one part of the province, and there's only about 120 cases of COVID. For about, let's say, maybe 1 million people, you get about 100 cases. We've been baseline like 40, 50 here for a while. So it's not like a big thing here, but you have to follow the rules. You have to wear your mask. You have to sanitize. Like it's quite a process. So it's been different to kind of see how different places have been doing it. Now, even with us, if you're doing the 2 shots of the COVID vaccine, they're spaced them out by like 4 months up here, which is a little kind of kooky. Yeah. But for you guys, it's like bang, bang, 1, 2, like only a couple weeks between them. So it's just interesting to see how different it is between the two.
So before we wrap things up, because we are reaching the end of our time, but I want to talk about Loudmouth a little bit because I feel like you guys had such a good crew there, and then everyone kind of, and maybe I'm missing something, but it kind of felt like everybody left to do their own thing, and everybody's very successful in everything they're doing. But you guys at one point had really this dream team of guys, and even looking back, I'm like, man, I wish I'd found a way to sneak my name in there because you guys had something going on with the Loudmouth stuff.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Kyle running the show, Keith doing the production end of things, and now they're part of Sherdog Radio somehow, some way. So they've got that going on. But yeah, it just kind of the way that it worked out was I was kind of looking at doing more of my own things. I was doing 3 shows a week. It was Between the Links. We had a new Tuesday show that the name just escapes me, and then on Wednesday we had Early Stoppage, which ended up on another network somewhere. So we had that show too between myself and John Franklin. But Between the Links, I mean, Mike was host. There's Davidson, Keith, myself. John would kind of guest every now and again. And then you'd end up with all sorts of different, like it was a revolving door. I mean, I think the best episode of the show, I wasn't even there. Like I wasn't even on the episode when it happened, but it was Aaron Bronstetter's Nick Diaz thing. If you want to go back and find something crazy, it's Aaron Bronstetter reading a quote that you'd have no idea what it was. And it made no sense. And it was so not Aaron Bronstetter. And it was a Nick Diaz quote. So it was just kind of crazy the way that the shows kind of came together. Obviously, they already had a blueprint before I got there. We started Between the Links. And now Between the Links is on MMA Fighting with Mike Hex. So yeah, it's just, Mike ended up with MMA Fighting. I just had way too much going on. And at the time too, it was kind of looking like I was going to have a bit of a different move in my career, same company, but a different role, which I ended up taking. And when things open back up again, I'm going to be limited on my time anyway. It just so happens that I'm home pretty well every night, so I can still kind of manage and do a little bit of content here and there. But that happened at the same time. So as everything kind of fell into place, Between the Links went elsewhere. Early Stoppage went elsewhere. And listen, those guys are still doing a good job over at Sherdog and Sherdog Radio. But yeah, it just sucks. I mean, I don't get to see Davidson anymore when he shaved his head.
Yeah.
That was kind of crazy too. Yeah, no, those shows were a lot of fun for sure.
I think, and we did talk about this a long time ago, but I think what caught people off guard was like how seriously some of these people took it. Like Keith was ready to rip your heart out if you said something stupid. Like I think you even said you had some guests that were like, "Hey, that was cool, but I ain't coming back on." Like it was. I like how unique it was in that sense.
It's funny that you mentioned that because I mean, JHK is doing the interviews with our channel now. When he and I were just kind of going back and forth and kind of fleshing things out, he brought that show up and he was like, "Man, I was on that show one time and like." Didn't go well, and I was so like intimidated. Yeah, like so you talked about Luke Thomas's way of arguing, and if I went to my mom's house, I got a class ring when I was in high school, but on the side of my class ring, and not idiot, and people kind of made fun of me, but I had debate on the side of my class ring because I was in debate grade 10, 11, and 12, and I go around to tournaments in the province, and I took it pretty darn seriously. So when it was on that show, you knew when you could have fun. But if you had to dig your heels in and go at like a Keith or a Davidson, you would try not to go at the guest too hard. But yeah, there were opportunities for that for sure.
It was fun though, because obviously, you get invited onto a show like that. I was only able to do it once because that was the one time I was in America and the times lined up. And I'll watch a few just to kind of get ready for the format. And it was like, oh, okay, take your glasses off, take your suit off. Like, don't just read off some stats. Like, go at these guys, be a little bit aggressive. You know that this guy you can sort of make fun of. If this guy you make fun of him, he's gonna come at your ass. Like, but for that, it was fun. And I feel like BTL now with MMA fighting, it's got a version of that. But if you don't have the screaming Boston guy on the show, then you're just never going to catch the true essence of what that show once was.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't had the chance to watch it, but I mean, now listen, they've got a good revolving cast there, and they bring on some of their own guests, and they do a good job. But you're right, it's not. But again, it's MMA fighting, so you can't really have somebody screaming and getting too intense, and you got to kind of watch your cuss
Yeah.
words, like I watch when I'm on other shows, but also my own shows. So yeah, it's a different show, but it's still good.
How did you get? Obviously, I know it could be it's sort of a weird subject, but how did you guys feel seeing like all these different shows end up on all these different networks? Like, I assume part of it's like, oh, cool, and then another part where it's like, that was us, man. Like, what happened? Like, I felt that way about some of them, and I wasn't even a part of it. So, with what you can tell us, how did it feel when you started seeing stuff like that?
I mean, it took a little bit of time, I want to say, before Between the Links was on MMA fighting. And I mean, John and I wanted to keep doing a show and that show. So we ended up just continuing to do the show anyway. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's always weird when stuff like that happens. I mean, it's kind of like, listen, Cheers is cool, but we've got the show called Frasier. You're gonna really like it. So yeah, it's always kind of weird just watching it from afar. Obviously I kept in contact, like I was talking to Keith this weekend about the main event UFC 260. I was talking to, John Franklin's still a part of the network and did the recap show last night. Like I still chat with Mike Heck and I still chat with Davidson. So it's not that weird, but it was like, how they always say, oh, it's appointment viewing. Well, it was appointment for me. I mean, like I would get fired up for Monday nights for Between the Links. And, again, you try and figure out who the guest was and you'd watch their stuff to see how kind of hard you could go at it a little bit. Like you try and
Yeah.
get an idea. But yeah, it's always weird kind of trying to watch from way back. But I mean, listen, obviously you don't wish anything bad against those guys and you want to see them succeed too. So I mean, Mike's doing a hell of a job over with MMA fighting. Keith, the rest of the guys, I know Ben Duffy and Keith do a show over with Sherdog. They do a great job. Davidson's kind of got his own thing going. He's marching the beat of his own drum on YouTube and he's finding success there. So it's just good to see that everybody's doing well.
Plus, what I like too is that it's easy to fizzle out when stuff like that stops. But I like the fact that when Mike announced he was leaving, he was going to MMA fighting. You're very happy for him, but you're like, what happens to these guys? And I'm glad to see that everybody figured out their own thing, and even the ones that are more independent, like say yourself, you still have a lot of success with what you do. So it was cool to see like everyone's in a good position, even though it's over now.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, still keeping the conversation going. Nobody's going to know that. I mean, most people probably figure I just go back into my hermit hole and
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
just me and Matt Allen. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's good to see. And I mean, for fighting too, I mean, they have such an interesting cast of characters now. It's just kind of neat to see where they're at and the content that they're putting out.
For sure. All right, listen, man. When we wrap things up, I always let the guest, do the little shout outs, anything they want to plug. I assume you've got a ton of stuff. You're wearing the merch, but there's no logo from any promotions on there. So there we go. So listen, man. Anything you want to shout out? If you want to remind people that you are a grown ass man, now would be the time.
I'm married. I'm 26. I've got a Canadian flag on the side of my shirt. No, I mean you really capped it off well. Like obviously wish nothing but the best for everybody from some of the shows that we were on. I mean, like you said, Mike, Keith, Kyle, the list goes on from Loudmouth. They really helped me kind of figure out my voice in the space. Like, I do my own thing, but it was super polished. And you kind of have to learn when you can be serious, when you can be silly, when you can kind of figure things out. So really have to thank those guys. And then especially with Fight Night Picks, I mean, we've got a really interesting few months ahead of us. We started this show kind of talking about how busy the slate's going to be in MMA coming up. So there's obviously going to be a lot to talk about. We're going to be branching out a little bit more with some of our content. So you're going to have to stick around for some of that. And yeah, this week is one of those ones where if I could fire up the margarita machine and sit on the back deck, I would, but it's cold and it was snowing earlier on today. So I'm probably not going to do that. But yeah, I'm just looking forward to it. You can always find us at Fight Night Picks. If you want to pick up some of the merch, you can. But yeah, you can find us there, YouTube, on the socials. It's all at Fight Night Picks. And really looking forward to a busy spring and wishing you nothing but the best too, sir.
Oh, stop. Well, listen, Craig, thank you so much for calling on the show, man. I appreciate it. For the people that made it to the end, holy shit, you made it to the end. That almost never happens. So we appreciate you guys, and we'll see you for episode 27.